big debate right now is optics versus irons. Something we need to think about is this debate is not just about technology. It's about how the brain visually processes information under stress. So oftentimes what may seem intuitive could actually be wrong. Let's go through the pros and cons of irons versus optics. So the first point I want to make is maintenance. Let's talk about the maintenance on a dot because this is kind of a con when it comes to choosing a dot over an iron sight. So we have a dot here. As you can see, you got a hood and glass. Now the glass you got to take care of because it's got to be constantly wiped down because it gets dirty real easily. And you also have to make sure the glass doesn't break or crack or anything like that. So there's maintenance to make sure that your glass is correct. On the other side of it, we have the emitter itself, meaning it's the projection of the dot onto the glass. Emitters go out, batteries die. It's technology, and technology can fail. Then you have to make sure your plate and your optic is screwed on tightly, but not overly tightened. And it has to be Loctited down in order to not move. So there's a lot of maintenance that goes into the optic itself. So you gotta constantly be taking it out and shooting it, making sure it doesn't lose zero because that happens very often. I have seen so many optics break in competition. It's not funny. But maintenance when it comes to the optic itself. Then we go over to irons. How much maintenance needs to go into irons? Very little because they're, irons. They're made out of steel. You don't have glass to worry about. You don't have to worry about emitter technology going out. Very, very often, I never ever see irons go out of zero unless they get dropped. And even then, I've dropped my gun quite a bit. It's in its case and I grab the case. I accidentally drop the case onto the ground. I've never had a zero go off of my iron sights. So these are very durable when it comes to kind of that maintenance situation. I think the only thing you really have to think about is if you're shooting a fiber optic front sight, changing that fiber optic every now and again because it gets dirty. But I mean, that's like a once or twice a year thing, depending on how much you shoot. So why are optics so popular right now? Well, because they're quote unquote easier to shoot off the start. Somebody who's never shot a gun before, they can easily pick up an optic and kind of hit what they're shooting at pretty easily because you have two aiming points. You have the red dot emitter, so you have the red dot inside of the glass, projecting directly onto whatever target you're aiming at. So you have the target and the dot. Versus irons, you have 3 points to line up. So that means the rear sight, the front sight, and the target, they all get lined up together. And every now and again, it gets kind of difficult to place that front sight right into these rear notches. You see my rear notch is actually kind of very small, and I do that for a precision reason. Now sometimes with the optic you're going to have a little bit of difficulty aiming because you're fishing around inside of that optic to find that red dot. So if you don't have a solid grip or your draw, whether you're in competition or concealed carry or having fun out on the range, sometimes it's hard to find if you don't get that good grip and that good stance and all the things. So getting that dot lined up perfectly within that glass is very difficult to do quite often. Then we get to irons and you have a solid unmoving point. They never move whatsoever. You know where they are at all times. So sometimes picking up an irons, you may shoot better with irons than optics because you're not having to search for that optic. Many people have claimed that optics are actually faster and more precise aiming point than irons. Now, the precise aiming point I will give optics because you can get, depending on how big your MOA dot is, you can get that dot to be ultra little tiny small for, distance, difficult targets. That is really great thing about the optic is you can get a very fine aiming point versus the blockiness of irons. But what I want to kind of, go over is that it's considered faster because your dot is just the one aiming point. So you can just, throw that little dot right onto your target, start pulling the trigger. And if you're having your proper grip and stance and everything, the dot never leaves the glass. Now, if your gun's, performing like this and you don't have your proper grip, you're going to lose the dot every time. But everything's going according to plan. It's just doing this. It's just bouncing a little bit. And you never lose sight of that optic, that red dot itself. Now, a big drawback from shooting optics is lighting. Lighting plays a key point in your optic because if the light comes in from the back or the front or in a very specific way at like dawn and dusk, your dot is going to disappear. If you're shooting kind of into that sun and that sun is coming in just above that optic, the dot is going to completely disappear. But during the daytime, not this optic specifically, but optics in general crush during the daytime. During the nighttime, are very, very easy to see and they're very fast. But that is the drawback for the lighting on the optics. A lot of people actually do choose when they're shooting like competitions or they're out just shooting, having fun with their family and friends, is that they will take a piece of dark tape and put it over the front of the lens of the optic in order to actually see the dot during those really difficult dawn and dusk daytimes, because that dot disappears when that light shines through and glares. So covering that up, you'll just get the emitter throwing the dot into that black abyss and you can place that on the target. I've seen a lot of people do this and they're very successful in doing that. On the other side, you got iron sights where it doesn't matter the light at all. You can shoot it because it's a post and a back part that never moves whatsoever. You have complete knowledge of where the gun is at all times and where your sights are pointed at all times because they're there constantly. So dawn, dusk, daytime, nighttime, these are always there. You never have to worry about losing them depending on the light. Let's talk about the visual aspect itself. So our eyes obviously play a very key role into our shooting. If you're having difficulty seeing about an arm's length away, then you might want to consider picking up an optic because you have that nice precise projection going out towards that target. If you can't see these irons very clearly, you're going to kind of struggle with it. These need to be the primary focus in your vision. Versus optics, your primary focus isn't the dot itself, it's the target. So if your vision is very clear way far out, an optic might be your choice. Something to consider if you're going back and forth between optics and irons is building the neural pathways in your brain. So it basically means your visual neural pathways where your eyes got to transfer, the information to your brain. You got to build those up separately from each other if you're going back and forth. Or even if you're just picking up a gun for the first time and you decide, okay, I want to shoot an optic full time. I don't even want to shoot irons. Well, you have to build your eyes and build your brain to recognize that dot. It's the same thing with iron sights. You have to build those neural pathways to recognize this is the front sight, this is what it looks like on the target with the rear sight. I can shoot this right now. So you got to do that with both of them in order to learn. All right, so if you're an iron sight shooter and you decide you want to go to optics, we got to build those neural pathways. So how we do that basically is we set the iron sight gun aside and we pick up the optic gun and we work a lot of draws and visual exercises. So you just come up and aim and come down. A lot of that because you're building your brain to recognize the dots. Something that I did when I started to shoot optics, because I hadn't built those neural pathways yet, I put a green front sight in my irons, and I have a red dot on my gun. Now, they make green dots and gold dots and other dots everywhere out there, but I wanted something completely opposite from my irons to build those neural pathways, so that if I ever went back to my iron sights, which I do all the time, so when I went back to it, I wouldn't have a red front sight, and my brain would be like, oh, red, optic, and I'd start shooting my iron sight like an optic gun. So that's something you can do to kind of build up both sides of optics and irons. Now, there's some people who struggle a little bit more when going from optics to irons. And the reason why is because when you're shooting an optic and you learn an optic, you're learning two aiming points. You have your red dot and your target. When you're shooting irons, you have three aiming points. You have the front sight, the rear sight, and the target. So when you're going from optic to irons, you're adding another aiming visual thing to keep track of and do. Versus if you started on irons, all you're doing is taking away one visual thing to think about and see. So that's why a lot of people really like starting on irons and then going to optics, because they feel like they can pick it up, the dot and the target, a lot quicker, because they have the fundamentals of aiming from an iron-sighted gun. But the big question is, when it comes to this, you got to ask yourself, is it easier to add something to your brain or to take it away? What do you think? Let's go into choosing an optic versus an iron for the situation that you want to mainly be using your firearm handgun for. So in competition, the name of the game right now is these optics. People absolutely have so much fun shooting the optics and building up high levels of speed with it. I don't blame them. I love it too. It's very, very fun. But is that exactly what you want to do when you're shooting your concealed carry gun? If you're shooting your concealed carry gun and carrying every single day, we already talked about the maintenance that goes into having an optic on your gun. Competition kind of shooters, they shoot their guns, at least once a week. But they're using their optics, they're maintaining them, it's not a big deal. Now, if you don't get an option to go out and shoot that often, then maybe an optic isn't right for you, because there is so much maintenance that goes in it. If you're only going out maybe once a month, you have no idea what's going on with your optic, especially, going with you in your day-to-day life. The chances and the risk of that optic being damaged and having malfunctions skyrockets when you're not on it almost every day. I'm going to go into story time now about when I first started concealed carrying. So I was 18, I had just moved to Alaska. I was so excited to be going to welding school and fishing every day and doing hunting and flying all over the country. It was just an amazing point in my life. But I turned 18 when I started living in Alaska, and I decided I wanted to conceal carry. I was living with friends, but I did a lot of things alone. And I wanted to be safe, especially from the crazy wildlife that roams the Alaskan woods. So when that time came, I needed to decide optics or irons. And I decided after a lot of time thinking that I wanted irons, because I didn't think I'd be able to keep up on the maintenance of an optic with my lifestyle. I run my guns ragged. I build stuff. I'm constantly on the go. As you can see, this is my concealed carry gun. It has been beat up pretty darn good, and haven't shot, thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds through it. But this is just the day-to-day roughness that gets put onto it from an EDC point of view. And I didn't really want to deal with the maintenance of an optic and taking the chance of accidentally breaking the glass or the emitter or anything else. So that's something for you to think about. On the other side of it too, you gotta think, what do I mainly shoot? Do you shoot a SIG, a Glock, a 1911. Me, I shoot a Colt 1911 nearly every day, and it's an iron-sighted 1911. So when I decided to conceal carry, I wanted to mimic my competition gun as closely as possible. That's why I decided to go with the 1911 platform and iron sights. This is my competition gun. This is my everyday carry gun. See how they're very close? They're the same style. They have a lot of the same work done to them so that I'm not surprised if I have to go to my gun. I know exactly what it feels like. I know exactly how it functions. I know exactly what I'm doing with it. When deciding to conceal carry, you gotta kind of think about what situations could possibly arise that you may have to draw your gun for. 90% of the time, if someone has to draw their gun for a conceal carry defensive reason, it's actually close quarters. So something to think about also is that if I have to shoot from, right here, do I want an optic or do I want an irons? With an optic, I have to be looking through the glass in order to kind of know where I'm shooting. Even though it may be close quarters and I think I can hit from here, I never want to think to myself, I think I can do it. I want to know I can do it and I want to see what I'm doing. So that's why with irons, it's a great choice because from your peripheral vision, whether you're shooting both eyes open or one eye closed, you can see in your peripheral exactly where that front sight is, exactly where that rear sight is. As you can see, I'm not looking at them, but I know exactly where they are from my peripheral. I don't have to guess as to where the dot is going to be aiming from, down here in that hand clap position. I'm going to give you an example of this. So this is the optic conceal carry like gun that I have lying around. Okay, I'm going to make my grip from down here and I'm going to almost pretend to shoot. So I'm shooting. I can't see where the optic is pointing. Again, this is going to be a close quarters like situation, but I could actually accidentally move my wrist a little bit and from my peripheral I can't see the dot, I can't see where it's aiming, and all of a sudden I move my grip a little bit and I'm shooting over here, or I push a little bit with my left hand and all of a sudden I'm shooting over there. So that's why I really like the irons when concealed carrying, is because from my peripheral point of view, I can see the front sight from right here that it's pointed to the left quite a bit. And I can see now it's back to center. I can see now it's to the right. I can see now that it's down. The peripheral vision plays a big point in concealed carrying. So when choosing an optic versus irons, kind of keep that into your mind. If you're still unsure if you want to shoot optics or irons, there are hundreds of ranges across the country, across the world, that actually let you shoot test guns in order to figure out what you want to shoot. My local range is one of them. Rowdy's Range is an indoor range in my hometown of St. George, Utah. They have an entire wall there of guns that you can actually test and shoot. And they have optics, they have irons, they have revolvers, they have double stacks, they have single stacks, they have everything you could imagine of wanting to test and shoot to figure out what is best for you. So go find a range near you that gives you that option and find what is your thing that you want to aim with.